All right. Good evening and welcome to tonight's stream. It's good to see you all back here. Thank you very much for joining in. Tonight's topic is going to be all about the different tips and tricks that the jewelry trade won't necessarily tell you without doing a bit of digging. So just a quick announcement, or not rather an alert, is that any questions tonight that are asked in the comments or in the question tab will be answered in the comments or the question tab. So please don't feel left out if we do not answer you directly live in the stream. All right, tonight we aren't going to mess around with too much stuff. We're going to jump straight into it. The first slide that we're going to have a look at is that which is a common misconception of fancy cuts or fancy cut diamonds being more expensive than round cut diamonds.
To add on to this fact is that the misconception of the fancy cuts being more expensive is not true. You'll see on the scale we portrayed the round diamond being heavier, and the reason for that is you have more retention on your fancy cuts from the rough, meaning that the cost is lower. On your round cuts, you lose much more of the rough stone, meaning that you will pay more for it, seeing that a lot more of your rough cannot be recovered.
Yeah, the reason why it cannot be recovered is the diamond is cut is kind of a loose word to use with it. It's basically shaved to be in the shape that it is. So it's not like cutting a bread in two and now you have two pieces of bread that you can both use. It's basically sanding the bread until halfway, which means you have dust on the one side and the product that you sanded it into.
Unless it's a very big diamond, then you can laser cut it, but the bread is split into two, and then from there rework it. But the most common is just to shave it down, and the shavings you can't do anything, they're not worth anything. They'll be used in drill bits or something similar, but no worth to jewelry.
Alright, the next slide we're going to have a look at. If you attended our first episode, you'll know that the color spectrum of diamonds is generally in yellow. Today we're going to have a chat about certificates that have a color grading with a little asterisk on top, or ECG, which is equivalent color grading. So if you look on the screen, you'll see here is color grading all the way from D down to Z, and this is a normal yellow color, a yellow undertone or overtone. It's quite standard. Now with ECG, or equivalent color grading, that just means that the diamond is of that color grade, except the color is just slightly different. For example, a stone can have a gray undertone or even brown. Some stones can become a bit of an orange undertone, or so those colors can change. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it just means the color is different.
Yeah, it's not a standard color. Now I know that there are people that say that you should absolutely stay away from a stone which has an equivalent color grading with the asterisk or the ECG, which means equivalent color grading. Many people say that you should run for the hills when you find such a stone. We disagree. We always will advise anybody to first have a look at the stone in person, see what you're paying, so that you know whether you're getting visual miles for the money that you're willing to spend. It doesn't mean that your ECG stone is not a attractive stone or a beautiful stone. It sure is. You do pay a less of a price, you don't pay a full price, and sometimes the difference between your ECG and the normal standard color is so small that you wouldn't really want to pay the extra thousands to get a standard color. It all depends. So work it around your budget, work it around what you see and what you're willing to spend to get the stone of your choice.
It's not that an equivalent color grading of a stone indicates that it's not a diamond or not the same grade of a diamond. The color of a diamond, if we get very technical for just a minute, the yellow color of a diamond comes from the diamond being formed near nitrogen. Now, if these nitrogen molecules are spread further apart, the color tends to be more gray, and if these nitrogen molecules are much more bunched up, it goes more brown. Somewhere in between is yellow, and that is that's basically the difference between a standard color, which is yellow, and the equivalent color grading is the spacing of the nitrogen molecules.
All right, on the next slide, Dante is going to tell us a bit more about the fluorescence of stones, ranging from none all the way to very strong, and what impact it has on the stone as well as the monetary value.
So sometimes people will see a certificate and it says fluorescence medium or strong blue or any of those things other than none, and then become very scared of the stone. We've had a few clients ask if fluorescence indicates that the stone is not natural or that if it is a fake. The answer to that is no. Fluorescence is basically like freckles. Either you have them or you don't. It's not that you aren't human anymore. It just means that you have a different characteristic to your skin. So with fluorescence, it can have an effect on the stone visual appearance, just under normal light or under sunlight. As you can see here, each stone has been photographed under normal light as well as ultraviolet lighting. So you can see that even the very strong fluorescence has almost no effect. You wouldn't ever be able to tell that it has fluorescence. Now, in some cases, fluorescence can make a stone appear whiter, and in some cases it can make it appear slightly more saturated with color, whether that be yellow, gray, or brown. But in general, fluorescence doesn't matter that much to the naked eye. Now, if you are big on partying in clubs, that's going to be a cool party trick to show your stone is glowing in the dark. But other than that, it doesn't have much of an effect on the stone itself. But again, always look at the stone, and please don't be blocked by a certificate. If a stone is absolutely beautiful, everything you've ever wanted, and then the certificate says medium fluorescence, please do not let that put you off. You've seen the stone, so again, just have a look at the stone and not necessarily the certificate.
No. This image is showing that once you have many small diamonds next to each other, that they will all differ in terms of the intensity regarding the fluorescence. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Especially with the smaller stones, because they aren't all individually certified. It's much easier to have an item that looks similar to the one on screen, where they all, as Charles mentioned, have a different intensity of fluorescence. That's just because the small stones, what we refer to as smalls, because they are small stones, they are not grouped according to fluorescence or not. So if you have a ring with quite a few smalls on it, the chances that a few of them have strong fluorescence or medium fluorescence is going to be quite high. The ladies that have their nails done, I think it's the acrylic that is cured under the ultraviolet light. We've had a client that phoned me with concern in her voice and said that a few of her diamonds were glowing when she was having her nails done. She thought a few of the stones were fake or unnatural, but that is just, especially with small stones, some of them are going to be a bit fluorescent, but because they aren't individually certified, there's no way of really knowing other than putting them under a black light.
I also had a client recently with the same concern, where she used her granny stones, and seeing that she's in the beauty industry, also had the same concern of her stones glowing, or a few of them. And there was the same question. So it seems like this is one of the misconceptions. On the next slide, we're going to be looking at many more misconceptions that the general public has regarding jewelry. We're going to be looking at valuations. We're going to be talking about what goes into a valuation, why they're not supposed to cost an arm and a leg, as many people do ask. And also, it is definitely not a reflection of what you're going to get for your item once you sell it. We'll get into more detail shortly. We're also going to be talking about how your design impacts the price, also a very big misconception in the trade, to the public. And then also, we're going to touch on jewelry and services.
So having a look at valuations, the first bullet point that says what goes into valuations, that is basically an evaluation of the stone or the piece of jewelry, what metal it is made out of, how many stones it contains, what type of stones those are, and then also lastly, the value of the whole ring. Now, just to touch on the second point is why it shouldn't cost thousands of rands or even hundreds of rands is because it's basic math. You shouldn't be paying for a valuation any more than you would pay for an extra math class for one afternoon. The reason for that is you could work it out on a quote, the same quote that you were given. The description is going to stay the same. All that you do is you are taking into account what inflation could look like over the next 2 to 3 years. That includes the gold price that might rise, the rand dollar that might weaken or strengthen, generally weaken, and then also just labor cost increases. So that's basically a projection of what it could be in 2 to 3 years from now, the replacement cost in the future. So that brings us to point 3 as to why the valuation is generally higher than either its current replacement cost or the amount that you will be getting for it if you sell it. So there is quite a big difference between all three of those. The selling, if you were to sell that item, please bear in mind that if you're selling it to a jeweler, you aren't going to get back any of the labor that went into it, because basically the ring will be bought and then dismantled and refined, and then new jewelry will be made from that. So none of the labor is bought back, and also not any of the profit. So basically you get money for the raw materials that you are selling. If you were to sell an item privately, obviously you would get more for it, because the other person is buying it as is, as a ring, as an item, which includes a bit of profit as well as the labor which went into it. Then we get to the replacement cost, and why that also differs a bit from a valuation is because now is not 2 to 3 years from now. The valuation, as we mentioned earlier, is for a future replacement value. So let's say you bought a ring from us today, and I give you a valuation today. What you pay for it today and what the valuation states are going to be two completely separate numbers. Even in a year from now, we haven't reached the maximum of what the valuation was intended for. Now, the reason why the valuation is that escalated is to ensure that you are not underinsured, to ensure that you are not underinsured. Just make a distinction between those two words. So if you are going to insure your item, you can look at the valuation, decide to go a few thousand less, and then as the year progresses, you can up that so that you don't paying an unnecessary premium. Because for the first 2 years, you'll be paying for a premium for something that hasn't reached that value yet. So that is basically why there is that price discrepancy between those 3 points.
The labor is about 5 to 8 times more than the gold itself or the platinum itself. Another point I want to mention before we move on further down the list is we have clients that are very concerned and quite upset sometimes of why, when they want to sell the item, they're getting much less than what's stated on the valuation certificate. Now, we don't buy the labor, right? It means that if I make a purchase of that item, it is without any of those aspects, or the profits and the labor. So it's definitely not a reflection. What the insurance companies do is they've got a panel, and there's a few jewelers on the panel. So the details of the ring will be sent to them, and everybody will be given the opportunity to quote on the replacement of that item. Now, let's say you paid 30,000 Rand for your ring. It's valuated at 60,000 Rand, but I can replace that exact item for 25,000 Rand. Then the insurance company will pay you 25,000 Rand, because that 25,000 Rand enables you to get exactly what you had. So it's not to do with paying out to the exact cent, it's you as a client not losing on what you had in terms of the specifications. So if you had a red Uno with a purple steering wheel, you need to get a red Uno with a purple steering wheel. You as a client won't lose out on what you had.
The next bullet point we're going to look at is a lot of people, when we are talking about designs and we make suggestions to the design, they are concerned that adding a few aspects might increase the cost by quite a bit. and that is simply not true. So if you were to add a few different frills or curls or any of that to your ring, it's going to take the designer about the same amount of time to do that as to just do a plain band. So designing is generally the same. What influences the pricing of a ring is the weight. So unless the design changes the weight significantly, it won't change the price too much. With that being said, I do want to warn against changing the design too often, because after all, designers do charge by the hour. So if we're making slight changes to design, won't cost extra. If you are looking to have 13 designs made, that is a different perspective completely. So if you are generally, a design is done, slight adjustments are completely free. However, if you're going to redesign the ring into a whole separate thing, it's seen as a new design. So keep that in mind when designing, just save yourself a few rands there, but then also don't be too clammed up on, oh, I've designed it once, I'm going to stay with that.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to jewelry and services. Now, a major misconception is that jewelry will last forever. Remember that your gold, as well as your platinum, is a pliable metal. So after wearing it for months and years, it starts to wear and tear, especially under the finer parts, as mentioned in the previous webinars. They are prone to bend, they are prone to scratches. It's much like a tire of a vehicle, that after X amount of kilometers, you will have to get new tires or do a checkup if you've got a slow puncture. The same with jewelry, is we have people coming here after 3-4 years without servicing their ring once, very concerned and astonished of why one of the small diamonds has fallen out, which is exactly just that. The ring was not looked after. It is preferred that you make a visit, an appointment at the reputable jeweler. It will take literally 10 seconds to identify whether there's a problem with the claws or the setting or the structure, and to keep it nice and shiny once a year or once every 18 months, you can do a refurbishment which will cost you in the region of 1,000 Rand or even less than 1,000 Rand, which is a fraction of the price of the ring, but it keeps it brand spanking new.
Right, the next image that we're going to look at is just with regards to getting a ring size. So online you'll be able to find something similar to this image, which gives you a cutout for a ring sizing. It's not the most accurate, however it does give you a better ballpark than just a guess. We've had people guess that their ring size is a K for a man, which is extremely small for a man's fingers. So I knew already probably isn't going to be correct, and it ended up being a size V, and that is quite a jump, I must say. So you can have a look at these things online, get a printout one, make sure that you keep the dimensions of the page the same to help it to be a bit more accurate. But ultimately the best way to get a ring size is at a jeweler's shop. So you can go with your significant other that you are going to ask, just very casually walk into a jewelry shop, say, well, why don't we just take our ring sizes and write it down on a piece of paper, hand it to her, and you can tell her, when I need this, I'll ask you for the piece of paper. Meanwhile, you've already seen the piece of paper, you know what size she is. There's no concern about that. There's quite a few other ways to get a ring size. The other way to do it is using a piece of rope, which I wouldn't really suggest, because it depends on how tightly you pull the rope, your ring size can be off by quite a few sizes actually.
It also depends on how much slack the rope has. So come see us, as Dante mentioned, sometimes it's best just to walk in plain sight or hide in plain sight by asking her, and hopefully she won't catch on to you that's already busy with the process. So move over to the next slide, if there's nothing else to be said, is we're going to be looking at the difference in refraction between a diamond and a moissanite. On the left you will see it's an image of a diamond. Excuse the bright flash at 12 o'clock. I think that was added on as an effect afterwards. But the moissanite on the right hand side is very, very accurate. You'll see it's got a lot more color to it, a lot more colors of the spectrum of light, which is appearing as a moissanite. And that you can quite easily tell when you see it in person.
And just to give you an explanation of what a moissanite is, it is a man-made stone, which is a very good diamond alternative. The refraction is very similar. However, as you can see in this picture, moissanite tends to split white light into the different colors in that spectrum, whereas a diamond reflects light as it is. So a moissanite, the larger the stone gets, the easier you can see that it is not a diamond. Generally, these blue hues shine through quite easily, either blue or red. They come through much easier, whereas a diamond would be mostly black or white. You see either shadows or highlights. So if you're going to have a look at moissanite versus diamond on the internet, you are going to see people with some very fishy photography. The stones look like they are not even from the same base element. It looks terrible, I must say. Some people that promote a moissanite will make a diamond look worse, and people who promote a diamond will make a moissanite look worse. If you are interested to see the difference, come visit us. We'll gladly show you two stones next to each other so that you can see the difference in person. The only thing with viewing these types of stones on the internet is that there's always perspective. So who's posting the picture? This is the most accurate picture that we could find. The only thing that kind of bothers us is the flashes and the striations that appear. But the stone itself is very much accurate.
To go into a little bit more depth regarding a diamond versus a moissanite is the hardness. So the diamond is a 10 on the Mohs hardness scale, whereas a moissanite is 9.25, the same as a sapphire. So that sounds very, very close, but that difference between 9.25 and 10, even though 0.75 difference, is exponential difference. A diamond is much, much, much harder. We can actually link this back to a misconception, and also the shops really actually tricking the customers into them believing they're buying a diamond when they're actually buying moissanite. What the jewelry item will read in the shop is 9-carat moissanite diamond ring. So the main stone is a moissanite, and the very small pointers are actual diamonds. So they catch you. You as a buyer or as a person from the public, you read moissanite a diamond, so you make the connotation that your moissanite is a diamond. However, they are referring to the very small stones being the diamonds, but it's a moissanite. So it's a bit of play on words, which is tricky, so don't get caught.
The next slide that we're going to have a look at is kind of a technical scale, but there you'll see the refraction difference between a diamond and a moissanite. You'll notice that a diamond keeps its light white, even though it is still refracting. However, a moissanite will split it into different colors. We're going to have a look at silver quickly, and something to avoid with silver is actually bleach or jig. If you're going to ever be cleaning the floors with even J's fluid or jig, please remove your silver. So this picture is not exaggerated whatsoever. It's actually very much realistic. On the left, this isn't a clean ring, by no means. On the left is normal tarnish, which is just with normal wear and tear. It will eventually end up looking like that, just with an oxide layer that forms. However, on the right is when it comes into contact with strong chemicals, especially if it comes into contact with jig. A chloride is formed, which initially is grey, but as soon as it comes into contact with light, it turns pitch black. So if you don't want your jewelry to be black, please avoid jig, but it does have its uses. If you watched our episode 2, you'd notice in Mukume Gane, the black striations throughout the metal, that's actually tarnished silver. So it does have its uses, however, not everyone is a fan of pitch black jewelry.
It's also a good way to give your jewelry an antique look. Alright, I think that's all we can say about that. It is pretty straightforward. If we look at the following slide, you will see there's red markings in the diamond. Now, the left and right image is the top view of a diamond, whereas the center picture is the bottom view of a diamond. Now these markings is all of the same diamond, if I'm not mistaken.
The right one is not the same.
Okay, the right one is not from the same diamond, but the markings in the diamond is acting as a fingerprint, meaning that there's no diamond in the world that will have the same markings at the same places, the same place or the same size. It is a good way to identify whether you receive your original diamond back, especially if you send your jewelry in for cleaning or for adjustments. It is a big concern that your jewelry gets swapped, and it does happen, unfortunately. It gives the diamond trade a very bad name. However, the jewelry community is quite a close-knit community. My apology is that you quite easily be put out of business due to your fellow members in the trade seeing that as a danger for the diamond trade especially.
Yeah, so generally inclusions are not visible to the eye. So could you pass that to me, please? You would generally use an item similar to this, which is called a loupe. It's basically just a magnifying glass, and you can peer into the diamond to find its inclusions, and you can then use those as an identity document, or even like as Charles mentioned, a fingerprint to identify your diamond. The next slide we're going to look at is actually quite interesting. A lot of you might have heard about the mineral or the crystal structure called tanzanite, but not many of you might know that it is actually brown before it has been treated. So this is what natural tanzanite looks like. It is possible to have the more violet purple color natural tanzanite, but that is only if it has been heated up by nature, if it's been close to a heat pocket or something like that.
Now these brown stones will be heated to approximately 550 degrees before they give you the blue-violet color, as seen in the following slide. This is a cut tanzanite. The tanzanite is a beautiful stone. However, I think it's way overpriced, seeing that as a brown stone is actually unattractive in its natural form before it gets its beauty with the blue coloration. It's a very soft stone. It's not really the best buy for using tanzanite on a ring, seeing that your hands have much more movement and come into contact with hard surfaces. So the beautiful stone or the tanzanite is best used as earrings or a pendant, but not as a ring, just because it's very, very soft. It's almost comparing a brick to a bar of soap when you compare other gemstones to a tanzanite.
Now for the next picture, if you do have a weak stomach, then please avert your eyes until we tell you that the picture is over. This has just got to do with cleaning of rings. Now, we're going to stay on this slide for just a moment, but the following ring, you'll notice it has a cut at the bottom. We had to cut this ring off of the lady's finger because for 13 years it remained on her finger. So obviously it could not be cleaned because it couldn't be removed. If a ring ever gets stuck to your finger, please remove it. Or have it removed. The reason for that is it can cause complications on your hand. Your finger might actually change shape. Your knuckles might actually swell, and the bone structure might also change to accommodate this foreign object on your hand. So we're moving over to the next slide quickly, and you'll see how much debris has been collected underneath the ring. So you'll see that is the inside of the ring. There's actually a main stone hidden behind this white substance, and that is dead skin and cream and sweat, which has accumulated in this ring. So you'll see there's a giant gash here at the bottom. The initial incision wasn't as large, it just had to be bent open to remove it from her finger. So ladies, please remember to keep your jewelry clean. It does help with keeping your ring safe, as well as keeping your jewelry beautiful. Now the next slide we're going to have a look at is how subtle damage to a ring can cause a loss of a stone. So many times we'll have a client come in, as Charles mentioned, after years and say, I didn't do anything, the stone just fell out. So if we have a look at the main stone and it's one claw here at the bottom, you'll notice that it's not even touching the stone anymore. That means that claw has either been knocked or been hooked on something. Now, if we have a look at the missing stone, or where it should be, you'll notice that this claw is also very much out of place. So even if you didn't do anything, something happened to your ring. Claws do not spontaneously release their stones back into nature. So if you do knock your stone, or you feel its hook on clothing at all, please do bring it in for a checkup. As Charles mentioned, 10 seconds will tell you this claw is loose, this is how much it's going to cost to fix it, make your ring look 100% new again.
The next image is actually due to clients insisting on a very fine design. We will always advise that you don't go thinner than a certain thickness or the width of the ring, depending on the design. But many times clients look at a ruler and they say they want their rings to be smaller than 1.8 millimeters, for instance, on the shank itself. Now a ruler makes it look very large, but if you look under a vernier, 1.8 mils is very fine, especially if you put it in your hand. It's actually quite perfect. It doesn't look bulky or big at all. On the weak spot where you see that the shank separated from the other part of the ring on top, that is due to thin pieces of metal. Your ring is prone to break on the thinnest part of the ring.
So when designing a ring, please also do keep in mind, as Charles mentioned, the thin parts are what are going to break first. And if these thin parts are the parts keeping a stone in place, then obviously the stone is also going to disappear. There's not too much more to say. I see Charles does have an extra comment to add.
I want to mention that very, very seldom it happens that the metal might be porous, meaning that like a block of cheese, if you start cutting through it, then you'll only see this few holes, like the cartoon displays cheese to be. That also sometimes happens with metal. You can't see it until it breaks, or until you cut through it, and then you realize there's porous marks inside. That sometimes does happen, but obviously we will never be unreasonable. We always look at the cause and the magnification of what happened. Just like the previous slide that was taken, if you look under magnification, you can easily see that the ring was not taken care of. So it's always up to us to give you, well, we will always be very fair and reasonable with our pricing towards you. If it isn't your fault, we'll do it on us. It all depends on the circumstance.
All right, and that does mark the end of tonight's episode and also this week's series of webinars. If it has been helpful, please do let us know. Our emails are on screen. It's charles@yourdiamonds.co.za or dante@yourdiamonds.co.za. Thank you very much for joining us once again. It has been great to be able to offer these webinars throughout this week, just to bring a bit more information to the public.
If you have missed the previous episodes, please feel free to go have a look on YouTube. You'll find them there under which account?
Your Diamonds.
Your Diamonds. Right. It has been recorded. You can rewatch them. It really puts you in a position of giving you the advantage if you are in the market to purchase a ring, so that you do not spend more than you need to. We do thank you for your patience and your time spending with us. Thanks for your views and interactions. We appreciate it very much.
If there are any further questions that we haven't answered throughout these webinars, please do send us a message, whether that be on our email or on Facebook or even Instagram. Give us a call and we'll gladly answer them for you free of charge. But thank you very, very much for joining in, and we hope to see you guys sometime again.
Thank you.
Enjoy.